Okay, so a new series about writing songs. Let's just start. So in my album, Maps of the Dark, I have a song called Rejected. And I think that song's one of my favorites that I've ever written. So let's go through the process of how I wrote it. One of the first steps I have, usually when I'm writing a new song, is actually I like to get inspired by some song that really has influenced me throughout the years. So for example, on Rejected, I had been listening to songs by The Offspring recently, especially Come Out and Play or Keep Them Separated, which has a riff that goes in like the Arabic kind of scale. It sounds like this. And the song is really focused around that riff. Even when the bass line, it's playing a line that's kind of similar to that riff, gives off a similar vibe. So that's where I had the core idea for the song. I wanted to make sure I had a riff that was catchy and also kind of played off of that weird sounding scale just a little bit. It's not a ton like it. You never want to rip things off, but having inspiration is really important for actually creating things that you really enjoy. If you ignore the thousands of years of music history that have come before you and you start from scratch, you're gonna end up in some desperate places, okay? You'll just be lost, trust me. I sat down and tried to think of a riff for a little while. I came up with this little ditty. And that's it. That's the main riff of the song, it's the main hook of the song, and it really sets the tone for the whole thing. So I knew the song was going to start with that riff. And let's see it in the program. So although I knew I wanted the song to start like this, I knew I wanted to build as well. Rather than just having the riff start playing alone, I decided to have a reversed build up to where the riff would come in. So you'll hear here, here. The riff actually starts after this reversed build up. So I played C minor, I let it ring out, I reversed it, and then I also had a reverse cymbal on top of that. And then it just cuts out to leave some dead space. And then I had the riff come in. But I didn't want it to just be the riff alone, so I added delayed ghost snare hits. And then you hear here, You hear that I wanted it to build up, so I had it do a little bit of a hit and then the bass line started playing up high. And you really knew that it was gonna build into something bigger, which it did, so. I actually also added a second instance of that riff being played on the left speaker while the first one was on the right. And then to give a little bit of a hint before the music came in, I added a little bit of a hit like that, which is always a little fun addition to add into music. So you'll hear that, I'll solo it here. It's a great way to just get people excited. Now typically when I write chords to follow along with a riff or a song, I keep it pretty simple and I always tend to use the same types of chords. I like to stick with minors as well as like C minor to G sharp major, because those just sound like what I've wanted my sound to be over the years. However, I wanted to change things up a little bit this time. So instead of just doing the typical thing I would do, I decided to have a quicker switch up of chords while the riff is playing in the background. So it goes. And you hear how that's much quicker than, you know, holding out the typical 4 chords that you would use. If you get stuck in the rut of always playing 4 chords or 3 chords with a specific duration of time between swapping each one, your songs will become stale over time. And I've tried to start avoiding that over time as I've written more and more. Additionally, instead of just playing the riff on a clean, simple guitar tone, I added a ton of fuzz. To really give it a rock sound. And all those elements together should help make your riff really pop out. I actually added a drum part that also mimicked the riff in some ways. It is really just playing every 8th note. It's playing either a kick or a snare. That really gives it a high energy. Because if you do doom, 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 it'll have a little bit lower energy than doom, 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 which is the beat that I decided on. So after I'd written the first riff, I actually didn't go straight to the verse. I went to the chorus, and that's something that I actually do a lot because the chorus is like, I like to think of it as the chorus of the song. I moved to the chorus, which I wanted to be a little bit more open, kind of wanted the song to explode. And I also didn't want it to repeat twice in a row, so I changed up the chords. So this is what I found for a chord progression. You'll notice that instead of going to the typical 4-chord structure, I went up to a minor. So after this chord, most people would probably go here. I tried to subvert expectations just a little bit by adding a spicier chord in there. And then the second time around, I wanted to make sure it changed even more. So I did actually go to that 4th chord that people would expect, but it added a stranger chord there as well. As I wanted things to open up in the chorus, I didn't want a complicated melody. The melody is much quicker in the verses, and while in the chorus, I wanted to make sure I had something a little bit more open. That's why it's a held out legato note here. Years go by, they just fade away. Every single moment is another second wasted. I wanted to simplify the chorus as well, because if you have too complex of a chorus, it probably won't end up being as catchy, and I thought it just fit the vibe of the song, to have things simplify, but also get louder in the chorus. That just created a lot of dynamics in the song. I will say the verses could potentially be seen as weak here, because it's mostly just drums, bass, and singing. However, I think the bass line mixed with the drums and the melody is catchy enough, so let's listen to part of it here. So although the bass line is very simple, it's basically sticking on the roots notes of the chords, it does add little flourishes here and there, which just keep it from getting stale. That little might have saved the bass line there, otherwise it would just be playing in 8th notes the whole time. That would get a little bit boring. Then in the second half of the verse, I also wanted to add a layer. So I added guitar. I tried to change it up just a tiny bit by adding me sliding down at the end of each chord. And if I solo this, you should be able to hear that just a little bit. You notice there how I go. Every detail you add will be something that the listener can peel back at another time, and it will make them that much more invested in listening again. Otherwise, your song might be catchy to listen to once or twice, but it could get boring. So now that we've covered the verses, the intro, and the chorus, I think it's important to mention the bridge, which might be my favorite part. Right before that, I want to mention the pre-chorus and the second chorus. So before the second chorus, just so things didn't get too formulaic again, I added a pre-chorus, which sounded very different from the rest of the song. I think the real standout here is the bass line, which sweeps up and down throughout. This kind of mirrors the thing I did with the guitar, where I'm sliding down. It's a very weird sound, but mixed in with everything, it actually sounds pretty effective, I think. Especially with the vibe of this section, which is supposed to be, you know, flowing back and forth and more smooth. Now let's move to the bridge. So I went back to the riff, but I wanted something to be a little bit different this time. Despite the drums actually playing the same exact part, I added a synth in the background that had a phaser on it. And I'll play that for you here so you can hear what that sounds like. It's a very strange sound. So as you can probably tell from that sound, is I'm trying to go for more of a watery aesthetic here. Phasers are great ways to do that. So I actually added a phaser to the guitar as well. So I think both of those combined really emphasize what I'm going for there, and I hope they make it obvious. While that's all going on, I added a muted guitar that's just strumming like, just to give extra percussion. And then I had the bass start rolling on a note, just like it did in the intro. And then I actually had it climb down to... It's not something I would normally put in my music, and it's something I'm really glad I did, because it changes the way this transition works. That moment that you're suspended, you're like, where are we going? And that's the exciting part, right here. And then I explode into a guitar solo, which has two sections, and I like to do this with a lot of my guitar solos. And these can go in either order. Section 1 is a little more rapid and energetic, and section 2 gets more vibey, kind of. The energy doesn't necessarily go down, it's less rapid though. And you'll hear the difference in style here. So there it's like, but as soon as you get to the second half, it's more like, there's three things that go together there. It's actually all the instruments, instead of playing something rapid like, instead of playing something rapid that's playing every eighth note, it goes to something that plays intermittently when it fits with a catchy sound. That includes the drums, the bass, and the guitar. All three of them actually work simultaneously there. As for the solo itself, I wanted to bring it back to that motif of like an Arabic scale. As far as the intro went, it didn't really totally sell the idea of it being that sound. So when we got to the solo, I wanted to expand on that idea a little bit further. It's probably my favorite solo I've written. And then I like how the song so fluidly transitions back from that solo, seamless, back into that chorus, just with a drum fill and with an extra little guitar mute strum. And that's essentially the whole song in terms of instrumental. As for the lyrics, you guys can look at those in the top right corner. I will link the song in the top right corner, and you guys can go look in the description of that video. The lyrics will be there. There is one thing I wanted to point out though. The theme of this song, as it was called Rejected, was of course rejection and getting over it and moving on, despite having people say no to you over and over again. One thing that I did that I thought was somewhat creative with the lyrics here is that I had a play on words, where I did have the phrase no repeated many, many, many times throughout the song. I think it was like maybe 6 times or something in the first verse and then a few times in the second verse. But the second time around in the second verse, I changed the no from meaning like the opposite of yes to no as in knowledge. Knowledge. That play on words had something that had the same exact sound, a homophone, that had an entirely different meaning. I was talking about the ability to gain knowledge from your rejection, and I turned that into the direct translation of that no literally turning into knowledge, which I thought was a pretty cool concept. Putting little details like that into your music is fun because if people do spend the time, as I said, they'll have more reasons to come back to the song, and that's what you really want. Getting somebody to like your song or think it's okay on the first listen is fun, but having somebody go back many times and having it become one of their favorites is like a much more transcendent experience. So this wasn't a scripted video in any way. This is a very new format for me. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know what you thought down below if you guys were interested by this, and if you'd like to see me do this for other songs. I didn't go too in-depth because there's actually more I could have talked about, but I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter. I mean, my film time is already at 23 minutes right now, so this is going to be a pain in the butt to edit. However, I think it was worth it, and it's also a fun way to talk about my own music, which I have spent a long time on, and not a lot of people have seen. If you guys are interested in the song, I'll have it linked in the description. I'll see you on the flip side.
Wow.